If you are a woman who spent years giving your loyalty, your patience, your prayers, and your love to people who eventually hurt you, this message is for you, not for the young, not for the careless, but for the woman whose heart has been worn thin by time, sacrifice, and silent endurance. If betrayal came from family, from someone you raised, trusted, or stood beside for decades, and you were left asking God in the quiet of your room, why did this happen to me? Then listen closely. This is not a message to stir anger. It is a message to bring peace to a heart that has carried pain far too long. They never realized the cost of betraying you, because people who wound gently do not understand the depth of what they break. Betrayal rarely arrives with noise. It comes quietly, wrapped in familiar voices, trusted faces, and years of shared history. It does not knock on the door like an enemy. It sits at your table, eats your bread, listens to your prayers, and then leaves a crack in your soul that only silence can explain. If you are listening to this, it is likely because the wound did not come from a stranger, but from someone who once knew your heart. You gave loyalty the way only a mature heart can give it, not loudly, not for praise, but faithfully. You stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. You forgave more times than you can count. You believed that kindness would eventually be understood, that patience would be rewarded, that love would soften even the hardest heart. But betrayal teaches a cruel lesson. Some people do not recognize treasure until it is gone, and some never recognize it at all. The cost they never counted was not immediate. At first, betrayal feels like confusion. You replay conversations in your mind, wondering where you misstepped, what you failed to see, what you should have done differently. You search yourself before you question them. That is the mark of a pure heart. It looks inward first, but slowly the truth settles in. You did not lose them. They lost access to the best part of you. What they never realized is that betrayal does not destroy the betrayed. It exposes the betrayer. A person can smile, speak kindly, and still carry a fracture within their spirit. When someone chooses to harm a loyal soul, they do not walk away untouched. Something within them bends out of shape. Trust becomes difficult. Peace becomes shallow. Joy becomes something they imitate rather than feel. They may move forward, but they do not move cleanly. You, on the other hand, paid a different price. You paid in tears you did not show, in prayers whispered late at night, in learning how to be quiet when your heart wanted to speak, in discovering strength you never asked for but were forced to grow into. This kind of pain matures a person. It strips away illusions and leaves behind wisdom. Not the bitter kind, but the kind that sees clearly and chooses carefully. They never realized that by betraying you, they awakened something irreversible, not anger, not revenge, but detachment. And detachment is far more permanent than fury. Anger wants explanation. Detachment simply closes the door and turns off the light. When someone loses your trust, they lose the privilege of your presence, your warmth, your concern. That is a loss. No apology can fully repair. For a woman who has spent decades loving, giving, sacrificing, and holding families together, betrayal cuts differently. It does not scream, it sighs. It settles into the bones. It changes how you listen, how you love, how you pray. Yet it also refines. You stop begging for fairness. You stop explaining your worth. You stop chasing understanding from those unwilling to offer it. You learn that peace is not found in being right, but in being free. They never realized that the cost of betraying you would follow them quietly. It would sit beside them in moments meant to be joyful. It would whisper in the stillness they try to avoid. It would surface when they realize that something essential is missing. a warmth they once had access to but can no longer reach. The absence of your sincerity becomes noticeable only after it is gone. You may not see their regret. You may never hear an apology that matches the damage done. But life has a way of balancing accounts without announcing it. There is a weight that comes with harming someone who never intended harm. It is carried in restlessness, in fractured relationships, in the inability to feel fully at ease with oneself. Justice is often quiet, but it is thorough, and you were never meant to remain broken by what happened. The pain shaped you, but it did not define you. It taught you discernment. It taught you restraint. It taught you the sacred value of your own heart. You are no longer careless with your love, and that is not hardness. It is wisdom earned through suffering. They never realized the cost of betraying you, because the true cost was never paid by you alone. It was paid in the slow erosion of their peace, in the narrowing of their inner whirl. In the loss of something pure they will search for again and again without knowing its name. And you, having walked through sorrow, now carry something they cannot take from you, a quiet strength, a settled spirit, and a dignity that no betrayal could destroy. Betrayal hurts most when it comes from those you served, not those you fought. There is a particular kind of pain that does not come from enemies, because enemies never had permission to reach your heart in the first place. This pain comes from those you fed with your loyalty, sheltered with your patience, and trusted with your vulnerability. You did not meet them on a battlefield. You met them in kitchens, living rooms, family gatherings, shared prayers, and long years of quiet commitment. You gave them your best seasons, your strongest years, your gentlest intentions. And that is why the wound cuts so deeply, not because of what they did, but because of who they were to you. When betrayal comes from those you served, it feels disorienting. You replay memories that once brought comfort and now bring confusion. You remember the sacrifices you made without being asked, the times you stayed silent to keep peace, the moments you chose understanding over confrontation. You remember how you protected them even when they hurt you, how you defended them when others questioned their actions. And in the quiet moments, you ask yourself how someone so close could so easily disregard what you gave so freely. This kind of betrayal is especially heavy for a woman who has lived a life of responsibility and care. A woman who held families together, who showed up when no one else did, who gave more than she ever demanded. For her, betrayal is not dramatic. It is a slow ache. It is the realization that devotion does not guarantee protection, and kindness does not always earn loyalty. It is learning that being good does not mean being safe from harm. What makes this pain linger is that you were never fighting them. You were supporting them. You were believing in them. You were hoping that love would eventually be returned in the same measure it was given. But betrayal teaches a harsh truth. Some people grow comfortable receiving what they never intend to honor. And when they finally betray you, they often do so without understanding the magnitude of what they have taken. Yet there is something quietly profound in this kind of suffering. It exposes the difference between love that is given as a duty and love that is given as a choice. You chose to love deeply. You chose to serve faithfully. That choice reflects your character, not theirs. And while betrayal may wound you, it does not redefine the value of what you gave. It only reveals the limitations of those who failed to recognize it. Over time, this pain reshapes you, not into someone hardened, but into someone discerning. You stop offering your heart indiscriminately. You begin to understand that access to your life is a privilege, not a right. You no longer confuse familiarity with loyalty. And slowly, without fanfare, you reclaim your strength, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing you gave your best and still chose dignity. A loyal heart always searches itself first, even when it was not at fault. That is one of the most painful and misunderstood traits of a good soul. When betrayal happens, your first instinct was not to accuse or condemn. It was to reflect. You asked yourself what you missed, what you misunderstood, what you could have done differently. You examined your words, your actions, your intentions, not because you were guilty, but because loyalty naturally turns inward before it turns outward. This habit of self-examination is born from responsibility, not weakness. A loyal heart believes in accountability. It values harmony. It assumes that relationships are worth preserving and that misunderstandings can be resolved through humility. But when betrayal is real and deliberate, this same trait becomes a source of quiet suffering. You carry questions that were never yours to answer. You shoulder blame that was never yours to bear. For many women, especially those who have lived decades caring for others, this inward searching feels automatic. You were taught to keep families together, to smooth conflicts, to sacrifice your own comfort for the greater good. So when betrayal strikes, your mind does not rush to self-defense, it rushes to self-correction. And that can be exhausting. You replay moments late at night, wondering if being more patient, more understanding, or more forgiving could have changed the outcome. But there comes a moment, often slowly, when truth begins to settle. You realize that no amount of self-blame can repair someone else's choice to betray. You recognize that your willingness to reflect does not obligate you to accept responsibility for harm you did not cause. This realization does not come with anger. It comes with clarity, a gentle, steady clarity that lifts the weight from your chest. A loyal heart eventually learns a necessary lesson. Introspection must be balanced with self-respect. There is wisdom in reflection, but there is also wisdom in recognizing when the fault lies elsewhere. And when that understanding arrives, it brings relief. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop shrinking yourself to preserve relationships that no longer honor you. This shift does not make you cold. It makes you whole. You still value honesty, kindness, and responsibility, but you no longer allow those virtues to be used against you. You begin to trust your instincts again. You learn that loyalty does not require self-erasure. And in that quiet reclaiming of self, you discover a peace that betrayal could not steal. Some people mistake patience for weakness and silence for acceptance, and this misunderstanding becomes the doorway through which betrayal walks in. You were patient because you believed in peace, not because you lacked strength. You stayed silent because you valued harmony, not because you were afraid to speak. But to the wrong people, patience looks like permission, and silence looks like surrender. They assume that because you endure quietly, you will endure forever. They assume your grace has no limits. For years you held your tongue to keep relationships intact. You absorbed hurt so others could remain comfortable. You chose restraint over confrontation, hoping that time, kindness, or prayer would correct what words could not. This is especially true for women who grew up learning that keeping the family together mattered more than expressing pain. You learned to swallow disappointment with dignity and to carry sorrow privately, believing that endurance was a form of love. But patience, when misunderstood, becomes dangerous. It invites people to test how much you can bear. They say things they would never say to someone loud or reactive. They cross boundaries they would never cross with someone unpredictable. Your calm becomes a shield for them, allowing them to behave without consequence. Or so they think. They forget that silence is not the absence of awareness. It is often the presence of wisdom waiting for the right moment. What they fail to realize is that patience has an expiration point, even if it is never announced. Silence is not agreement, it is observation. And while you may not respond immediately, you are always paying attention. You notice patterns. You remember words. You recognize when respect has quietly left the room. And one day, without warning, something shifts inside you. Not anger, not bitterness, but resolve. When that moment arrives, there is no argument, no dramatic confrontation, no need to explain yourself. You simply stop offering access to your heart. You stop making excuses for behavior that no longer deserves understanding. You stop sacrificing your peace for the comfort of those who never protected yours. And this withdrawal confuses them because they mistook your patience for permanence. For a woman who has lived long enough to understand herself, this shift is powerful. You no longer need to prove your strength. You no longer need to justify your boundaries. You understand that patience is a gift, not an obligation. And when that gift is abused, it can be withdrawn without guilt. This is not cruelty. It is self-respect arriving late, but arriving nonetheless. They never saw it coming because they never understood you. They thought your quiet nature meant you would always stay, always forgive, always carry the weight. They never realized that your silence was not weakness. It was restraint. And restraint, once released, becomes freedom. The deepest wounds are not spoken, they are carried in prayer and solitude. There are pains too sacred, too heavy, too personal to be explained aloud. You learn this over time. You learn that not everyone deserves to hear your story. Some people listen only to judge. Others listen only to gossip. So you chose silence, not because you had nothing to say, but because your pain deserved reverence. You cried where no one could see. You prayed when words failed you. You sat alone, replaying moments that changed how you saw people you once trusted. These wounds did not scream. They whispered. They settled quietly into your spirit, shaping your thoughts, your habits, and your understanding of human nature. This kind of pain does not demand attention. It asks for endurance. For many women in later years, solitude becomes both refuge and burden. You have lived enough life to know that sharing pain does not always bring comfort. Sometimes it brings misunderstanding. Sometimes it brings dismissal. So you learn to carry your sorrow with dignity, speaking to God instead of people, trusting that divine ears could hold what human ears could not. There is something deeply spiritual about this kind of suffering. It strips away the need for validation. It removes the desire to explain yourself. It teaches you that some battles are not meant to be fought publicly. They are meant to be surrendered quietly. In these moments of solitude, you discovered a strength that did not come from being understood, but from being sustained. Yet carrying unspoken wounds has a cost. It makes you tired in ways rest cannot fix. It creates a heaviness that others do not notice, but you feel every day. You smile when expected. You fulfill responsibilities. You show up. But inside something has changed. You are no longer naive. You are no longer careless with trust. And that change, though painful, is protective. Prayer becomes the place where your truth breathes. In prayer, you do not minimize what hurts you. You do not soften the edges. You speak honestly, sometimes angrily, sometimes wearily, sometimes without words at all. And in that sacred exchange, something begins to heal. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily. You are reminded that your pain is seen, even if it is not spoken. Solitude, too, becomes a teacher. It shows you who you are without noise, without obligation, without the constant giving that once defined you. In solitude, you reclaim parts of yourself that were overshadowed by service and sacrifice. You learn that being alone does not mean being abandoned. It can mean being protected. The deepest wounds may never be fully explained, but they do not remain purposeless. They refine your spirit. They deepen your compassion. They strengthen your connection with the divine. And though no one may ever hear the full story of what you endured, the quiet healing that follows becomes a testimony written not in words, but in peace. You gave love freely, they gave harm carelessly, and life remembers the difference even when people pretend not to. There is a quiet integrity in love that is given without calculation. You did not love to gain advantage. You did not give kindness to control outcomes. You loved because it was your nature, because compass, iron lived naturally within you, shaped by years of responsibility, sacrifice, and faith. You offered warmth where others offered convenience. You offered loyalty where others offered conditions. And when harm came in return, it felt not only painful, but deeply unjust. What makes this kind of betrayal so heavy is the imbalance. You measured your words. You considered consequences. You restrained yourself out of care for others' feelings. They did not. Harm was delivered casually, sometimes thoughtlessly, sometimes deliberately, but rarely with reflection. While you prayed before speaking, they spoke without prayer. While you worried about how your actions might affect them, they rarely paused to consider how theirs would affect you. Yet life operates on a deeper accounting system than immediate fairness. It does not rush to correct wrongs, but it does not forget them either. Love freely given leaves a mark, just as harm carelessly inflicted leaves one too. The difference is that love strengthens the giver, while careless harm erodes the one who causes it. This erosion is not always visible. It does not announce itself. It works quietly, shaping character, narrowing empathy, dulling peace. You may never see the moment when they realize what they lost. Often, that realization comes late, long after access has been revoked. It comes when they search for sincerity and cannot find it, when relationships feel hollow, when trust no longer forms easily. They may remember you then, not with clarity, but with a vague sense that something once stable is now missing. For you, the pain served a different purpose. It clarified your values. It confirmed that your love was real because it survived disappointment without turning bitter. It showed you that kindness is not foolish, even when it is exploited. The wrongdoing of others does not cancel the worth of your goodness. It simply exposes who was carrying weight and who was merely leaning on it. Women who have lived long lives understand this truth deeply. They know that not all lessons are learned through reward. Some are learned through loss, and the loss experienced by those who harm without conscience is subtle but lasting. They lose depth. They lose trust. They lose the ease of being at peace with themselves. You gave love freely, and that freedom protected you. Even when it hurt, it did not poison you. Even when it was betrayed, it did not shrink you. It refined you. And life, patient and precise, continues to remember who gave from abundance and who took without care. Betrayal does not break a pure soul. It reveals the brokenness of the betrayer, though this truth often takes time to understand. In the beginning, betrayal feels personal. It feels like a verdict on your worth, your judgment, your past choices. You ask yourself how you could have misjudged someone so deeply, how you could have trusted so completely. But slowly, as distance grows and clarity returns, another understanding emerges. What happened? Ened was not a reflection of your insufficiency, it was a revelation of theirs. A pure soul assumes goodness because it carries goodness. It believes in sincerity because sincerity lives within it. When such a soul is betrayed, The shock comes not from the act itself, but from the realization that others do not operate from the same inner compass. This realization is painful, but it is also illuminating. It separates who you are from who they chose to be. Those who betray often move forward quickly, but they do not move forward intact. Something fractures within them the moment they choose harm over honesty, convenience over loyalty, self-interest over integrity. They may appear confident, justified, even relieved. But beneath that surface, there is an unrest they cannot fully silence. Betrayal requires constant justification, constant revision of memory, constant avoidance of accountability. You, however, do not need to rewrite your story. You remember events as they happened. You know what you gave and why you gave it. This consistency becomes your strength. While they must manage the weight of what they did, you are free to process what happened without distortion. For women who have spent decades cultivating family, faith, and responsibility, this distinction matters deeply. You understand that character is revealed not in comfort but in crisis, and betrayal is a crisis of character. It exposes who values truth only when it is convenient, who values loyalty only when it benefits them. A pure soul may be wounded, but it is not corrupted by betrayal. It grieves, it reflects, it withdraws when necessary, but it does not lose its essence. In fact, suffering often sharpens its wisdom. It learns discernment, it learns boundaries, it learns that trust is sacred and must be earned. Those who betray, on the other hand, carry a different legacy. They carry the memory of having crossed a line they can never fully uncross. Even if they justify it outwardly, inwardly they know. And that knowledge follows them quietly, influencing future relationships, future choices, future peace. You remain whole not because you were untouched, but because you chose not to become what hurt you. Your purity did not make you weak. It made you resilient. And while betrayal revealed cracks in others, it revealed strength in you that you may not have known you possessed. Detachment becomes the final language when explanations are no longer respected.